Okay, why don't we go ahead and get ourselves settled so we can get started. I know that Mark probably has, about 4 hours of information he wants to cram into this one. So I want to make sure that we give him plenty of time to share what the Lord has given him. And if you were here Sunday, I hope that it was, I'll tell you this. I think Mark even said it. It was like drinking from a fire hose, because there's just so much information, so much coming at you. So I know this will be probably a little bit more tamed in some respects, because it's going to, no, it won't be, never mind. But maybe a little more focused in one respect, if nothing else, so that we can get a perspective of from one week to the next of what God has shown him. But before we do, I just want to encourage you all to continue to participate in the things that are happening here at Living Hope. I know it's not a whole lot right now. It's just church on Wednesday and church on Sunday, but probably the most significant thing that I would ask that you to be a part of is our times of prayer. On Tuesday mornings, we have a Zoom prayer meeting at 7 o'clock, and there were only 3 of us on there I'm not saying anything negative. Because I know it was the 4th of July, all right? I wanted to sleep in. I get it. But there were 3 of us on there, and I would have to say, man, the Lord shows up when people come together to pray. And, please take advantage of these opportunities of a Zoom prayer. Our Wednesday evenings are 6:30 prayer before we start here. Please take advantage of these opportunities. I'm also going to say this because I haven't said it in a while. If you are watching online, please come to the house. We need you in-house. We need you to join us here in the house. I get to watch my little granddaughter on FaceTime, but it's not the same as actually holding her, right? When we're in the house, we're together. The body of Christ comes together. So please, if you're watching online, please come join us. Thank you for joining us. I know sometimes it's not always possible, but thank you for joining us. But please join us in-house when you're able. I guess I won't get into too many other things. The end of this month, it's a 5th Sunday. So the 30th, we will have our family feast. So just want to make sure we get that out there so people are starting to think about that even now. But before I just start rambling about things, I want to go ahead and introduce Mark to you. He'll open us or greet us and then lead us in prayer before we get into the meat of things. But I was going to say something and I just went, wow, that was loud. It went, okay. But no, I really appreciate Mark and his heart for what God has laid on him concerning these times that we're living in and what we can expect, what we should be looking for. I've said it on Sunday. Even Jesus himself said, I'm telling you these things so that you would not be deceived. We're in times where we need to know. We need to have an understanding of the things going on around us. And the Word of God helps us it doesn't tell us everything, but it gives us an understanding of what we can expect and what we should be doing regarding these times that we're living in. So, Mark, if you would come and you would share with us what the Lord has for us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the Corinthians, it says, Yeah, Corinthians, it says that we see in part and we know in part, but until the perfect comes, talking about Jesus. So we're never going to have a complete picture and understanding, but God has not hidden things though as well in that, in the sense that if he gives Jesus said this, like in a parable that the word is like a treasure or like a precious pearl that we dig for, and if you're hungry enough and you want to know and you dig for it, you will get answers and to what he would want us to know. And the whole end times eschatological information covers a wide range of information. And I mentioned this, and Pat's mentioned it. I got like 19 hours of teaching material, but even at my church, Good News, I teach it yearly, but I only teach about 8 to 10 classes consisting of about an hour and 15, 20 minutes each. So it's not even, I don't even teach the whole thing there, but it's to get people familiar. And even teaching it at church, I've been teaching it yearly since 2004. I have people that attend 3-4 times because it is drinking from a fire hose. And so it helps clarify things over time, and it gives at the same time opportunity to ask questions and answer things as they try to process and I don't quite get that. And so we process things as the questions come up. Now, having said all that, tonight's message teaching is on Daniel chapter 2, the dream of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had. And this is, because of the extent of information I have, but the limited amount of time, I've taken like big stones out of the prophetic plan. And so I've got this one out of Daniel, and then next Wednesday it'll be out of the Gospel of Mark, Jesus teaching on the Olivet, was referred to as the Olivet Discourse. And then on July 19th, Wednesday, July 19th, it'll be on Revelations and the seal, trumpet, and bowl judgments. But for tonight, we're going to look at the dream. And I think everybody have an opportunity to get the handout, right? So we're good with that. The dream reads as such. I'm just going to read through it as we talk through this and teach through it. It says, now in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. So right there, by implication, by what it's saying, is that they don't believe, the scholars don't believe that this is a one-time event, and Daniel happened to be there and he answered it. So he's had these dreams, but he has been frustrated in that he hasn't had an answer to what these dreams, and it's the same dream, what the dream means. So then the king gave orders to call in the magicians, the conjurers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. The king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. So he brought in all these. The magicians are like scholars, and the conjurers and exorcists are those who commune with the spirits. Sorcerers, they practice witchcraft. The Chaldeans are the astrologers, the star watchers. Verse 4, then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. So at this right here, beginning of verse 4, in the original language, it actually begins in Aramaic and goes through chapter 8 in Aramaic. This is the only part of the entire Bible that's in Aramaic, and it begins right here and through chapter 8 of Daniel. Verse 5, the king replied to the Chaldeans, the command for me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be made a rubbish heap. But if you declare the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Therefore, declare to me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell the dream to the servants, and we will declare the interpretation. The king replied, I know for certain that you are bargaining for time, inasmuch as you have seen that the command from me is firm. That if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the situation is changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, that I may know that you can declare to me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who could declare the matter for the king, inasmuch as no great king or ruler has ever asked anything like this of any magician, conjurer, or Chaldean. I would speculate that God has put it in his heart that if you want to know that you know, and to bring Daniel to the forefront, have them tell you the dream, and then, the dream you had, and then interpret it. So I got to believe that God put this into Nebuchadnezzar's heart. Verse 11, moreover, the thing which the king demands is difficult, and there is no one else who could declare it to the king except God's, whose dwelling place is not with mortal flesh. Because of this, the king became indignant and very furious and gave orders to destroy all the wise men in Babylon. So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them. Now Daniel and his three companions, they were brought over from Jerusalem at the first attack of Babylon. Babylon attacked Jerusalem 3 times. In 605 BC, and that's when they captured some of the prominent people of Jerusalem, like Daniel, who's understood to come from a noble family there in Jerusalem, and they took some of the wealth of, as all kings do, some of the wealth of Jerusalem. But then he put a king in place, named another king in place just to, like a puppet king in Jerusalem. 597 BC, that king rebelled, and so Nebuchadnezzar went back and took the king off the throne, took him to Babylon, put another king in place, stripped more wealth and such from the temple and from the king's palace and such. And then that king, he rebelled, and Nebuchadnezzar said basically that enough is enough. And then beginning in 589 BC, it took a couple years to actually overthrow Jerusalem, and they were starving the people out and everything. That was when they Babylon actually destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and leveled it, just desolated it, and took the people captive for 70 years. So there was 3 attacks. This is right after the first attack, and Daniel is there in. And if you've read the story and everything, he's being trained up by the king to serve the king, and now he's got an opportunity by God to show just how special of a young man he is. He's estimated to be about 17 years old at this point. So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them. Then Daniel replied with discretion and discernment to Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, who had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He said to Arioch, the king's commander, for what reason is a decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch informed Daniel about the matter. So Daniel went in and requested of the king that he would give him time in order that he might declare the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his house and informed his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, about the matter, so that they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning the mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel said, let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. It is he who changes the time and the epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to wise and the knowledge of men of understanding. So Daniel received the interpretation, and he goes back to the king. I'm not going to read every single verse in this. I'm just setting it up here. And we then have Daniel declaring the information to the king. And Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel, again, in his humility, says, it's not me that gives the interpretation, it's the God in heaven who gives the interpretation. And so it's from him that what I'm telling you, because he gave you the dream, I'm telling you what the dream is, like per your request, and then I'm going to tell you the interpretation, which is from God. And so we're going to jump down to, excuse me here. Excuse me here. Okay. As for you, O king, on your bed, starting at verse 29, on your bed your thoughts turn to what would take place in the future, and he who reveals mysteries has made known to you what will take place. But as for me, this mystery has not been revealed to me for any wisdom residing in me more than in any other living man, but for the purpose of making the interpretation known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts in your mind. You, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. And can we have that statue image put up, please? There we go. You were, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. That statue, which was large and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. The head of that statue was made of gold, its breasts and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, the legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and the clay and crushed them. Now in the handouts you have that image of the stone at the bottom of the statue. This image doesn't have that, but you do have it on the handout. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time. Now catch this. With the stone that fell on the feet, the iron and it struck it on the feet, and the iron and the clay of the feet, it was crushed. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind came and carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So the stone fell on the feet and crushed the entire statue, every part of the statue. Okay? This was the dream. Now we will tell its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, the beasts of the field or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand and has caused you to rule over them. You are the head of gold. Babylon is the head of gold. Now, as you look and see at these, each metal has assigned kingdom that it represents. Okay? And this is easy to say that historically, if you took a world history class in high school and or college, university, and you're going to study these kingdoms, okay? And it's easy to say, well, these are self-fulfilling prophecies, and that these occurred, so interpreting this, you just assigned these kingdoms to these metals because that's historically how they came about. But now I can't do this because of the sake of time, but every one of these kingdoms was prophesied to arise in this order in the scriptures. So it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. They were all beforehand prophesied to arise. And now God ordained which, as we read, God ordains which nations are going to rise and which nations are going to fall. And he had used the prophets to prophesy that Babylon would rise up, and then the Medes and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans, all prophesied beforehand before they arose. So these are, the prophecies have been fulfilled in the order that these nations have been presented here. So Babylon is the head of gold. And then it says, Daniel continues, says, after you there will arise another kingdom inferior to you, then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. Then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. In that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. The toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery. So some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay. They will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. So if you dig in the dirt with a shovel and you get into the mud and clay and all that, that when you're done, you can wash that clay off the shovel. It does not stick, right? It does not adhere. I mean, it'll stick for a little bit, but it will not remain permanently in there. It breaks away. So the imagery here is that there's going to be, in the future, there's going to be an attachment that takes place with the iron, between the iron and the clay. Now, iron, as you see in this diagram, both diagrams, iron represents Rome. Okay? Rome, the weapons they used were primarily made out of iron. They also crushed and defeated other countries around them like an iron machine running over them, over these other nations, and totally destroying, wreaking havoc on these other countries around them. To give you an example of the viciousness of the Roman Empire, they fought 3 Punic Wars, with the Carthaginians of northern Africa, and they fought 3 of the wars. Rome won 2 of them. Rome was trying to establish itself as a world, dominating empire. And the third one, that when they defeated the Punic, they didn't really need to even go to war against them. The Carthaginians were from the other wars, and they were depleted in monies and couldn't establish an army. They were traders. They had a great navy and were controlling the seas, and they were rebuilding it from the wars with Rome. And they were growing in trade and navy power, but weren't a threat to Rome. Rome saw them as a threat, attacked them anyway. They had no military might, army to defend themselves, and Rome destroyed the entire city of Carthage, and then went and salted the agricultural fields around Carthage so that the people could not farm the land, just destroyed the land. And that's the mindset of the Romans. It wasn't just defeat, but it was like utterly destroy their enemies. And they did that with the Carthaginians. And so the legs of iron here is there to represent just the nature of the Roman Empire. I'm going to go through all these again, but just to give you a little taste of what Rome is like in this. In verse 44, then it continues, "In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed." Now, in the days of those kings, he's referring to the feet, okay? The feet are an empire itself. I'm going to go into more detail, but I want to go through these scriptures here. So in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms. A stone fell on there and destroyed the entire statue, what the statue represented. "Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands." Now, who do you think it's talking about here? Jesus, yeah. "Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future, so the dream is true and its interpretation is trustworthy." So this picture, this dream that Nebuchadnezzar received, takes us all the way to the return of Jesus Christ to set up his millennial reign on earth. It hasn't even happened yet to us yet. We're still waiting for that to happen. But Nebuchadnezzar in his dream, got an image of all this taking place. Now, the gold represents Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar. This is where Daniel entered the scene, and he's given an understanding of the vision, the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and he's seeing forward from that point on. So then the next country, or empire, I should say, to arise is the Medes and the Persians. You have two arms, the Medes and the Persians, represented in silver. Okay, the Medes actually were the stronger empire. Then over a short period of time, the Persians superseded the Medes and dominated the Medes, but they were related by marriage and everything else, so they were getting along as well as they could, but ruling the world together. Then the Medes and the Persians were defeated by the Greeks, and under Alexander the Great. Okay? This is where things start changing geographically. Notice that the hips and the thighs are bronze, representing Greece. Greece is in the European continent. The Assyrians, Assyria, and Iraq, Babylon, that's all that Mesopotamian area is in the Eurasian continent. So now we have the Greeks crossing the continental divide, if you will, and going from Europe into Eurasia. And it's the beginning of that separation. That's why the thighs are represented here as part of the beginning of that cross-continental conquering. Then you have the legs of iron, and you have the Roman Empire, which is even further separated their empire into conquering everything that Greece conquered and the Medes and Persians conquered, and they conquered that to the east, and they actually set up in Istanbul, Byzantine. We call it Istanbul now, but it was called Constantinople under Emperor Constantine when he set up an administrative capital in the east. Then in the west, of course, Rome was still the capital, the administrative capital of the Western Empire, and most of you, I think, know the history that the Western Empire went all the way up to and conquered all the way up into Great Britain. And so all that is part of the Western Empire. And so you have the two legs representing the Eastern Empire and the Western Empire. Then you get into the feet. 5 toes on one leg, 5 toes on the other foot, on the other leg. This is where it gets into the future that hasn't even happened yet. These 10 toes represent 10 kings. Kings rule over kingdoms. So like one and the same. So you have 10 kingdoms, 10 kings, 10 kingdoms that are going to rise up in the end. Now, it's my understanding that since 5 of the toes are on the Eastern Empire and 5 on the Western Empire, that there's going to be 10 nations, and there's in Daniel and in Revelations, it speaks of 10 future kings that help the Antichrist rise to power. This is representing those 10 future kings that's going to help the Antichrist, the future world ruler, and Antichrist rise to power to take control of the world when we, the church, are gone. And those 10 kingdoms, being 5 in the Eastern Empire, 5 in the Western, I particularly believe that 5 of those kings and kingdoms are from the old Eastern Empire, 5 are from the old Western Empire, that are going to join together and help the future world ruler rise to power. Now, I'm not saying this as connected with the Catholic Church, the Pope, because there is teachings that the Pope is going to be the future Antichrist, and his old Catholic Roman kingdom is going to be the future kingdoms that's going to help the Antichrist. That's a European-centric position I do not hold to. I believe in a Levant-centric kingdom, and Levant being the crescent there with Israel, Syria, Turkey, Egypt, that whole area in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I believe that is going to be the central area of power, because in Daniel 7, it actually, when you follow it through, it actually, you come away with understanding that the future Antichrist is going to come from Syria. Now, I don't have time to go into that, but this is my takeaway from studying those chapters, that the future Antichrist is going to rise up out of Syria. And so it's not the Pope, but the Levant-centric control is going to be there in the near future. And so we have this dual kingdom, the dual feet, 5 countries, kingdoms from the Eastern Empire, 5 from the Western. And then this stone cut out without man's hands is Jesus. And he comes at his second coming, and he lands on the feet, destroying that future kingdom that helped the Antichrist rise to power, and destroys that future kingdom when he returns. At the same time, he destroys the entire statue. So what does that mean? Babylon is long gone. How can you destroy a empire that's not even in existence? Same with the Medes and the Persian Empire. Although today Persia is called Iran, but it's not in the sense of the Medes and the Persians as it was there. And Greece obviously is in an empire as well. What's it mean? What's it saying when it says that? Well, let's kind of expand our thinking a little bit here. Now, like I said, all these, the Babylonian, the Assyrian Medes, and the Grecian, and the Roman empires are all from world history. But when you study the world history, take the class, read the book, whatever, there's 2 additional empires that are not listed in this scripture. Does anybody know what those 2 world empires that existed that aren't listed here? Anybody think of those? The Egyptians and the Assyrians. Those were world empires. So you have the Egyptians, you have the Assyrians, you have the Babylonians, the Medes and the Persians, the Grecians, and the Roman empires. Okay? And then the future feet empire. Seven kingdoms. When you read the vision of the dragon in chapters 12 and 13 of the book of Revelation, how many heads on the dragon? 7. 7. Coincidence? No. There's a reason for it in the interpreting of all these visions. Daniel and the book of Revelation are two visions and dreams, or a series of visions given to Daniel. Now, Daniel was not considered a prophet. He was considered a seer, S-E-E-R, a seer. In the Jewish Bible, he's not listed with the prophets. He's listed in the writings because of the nature of his blessing, being a seer. He saw and understood dreams and visions and had dreams and visions. But the series of visions he had through Daniel continue and then connect to the vision given to John the Apostle in the book of Revelation, which is called the revelation of Jesus Christ to John the Apostle. So they are, I'm going to put this down. Daniel and Revelation are like one long connected vision or series of visions. They overlap where we just saw that in the feet take us to the return of Jesus Christ when he sets up his when he sets up the millennial reign. Okay? That's his return. The book of Revelation begins with the rapture of the church. So you have the overlap. You have Daniel going to the return of Jesus Christ. You have the book of Revelation starting at the rapture with us being taken up to heaven. So the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, the visions connect. They overlap. And the need when you're studying eschatology, the end times, you need to study Daniel first. Daniel gives you divine definitions that you apply to the symbols in the book of Revelation. Like we just saw, with the toes representing kings, and it's spelled out as you read that. It's spelled out that way, and so the information in Daniel is divine definitions, and like the seven kingdoms representing the seven kingdoms, which then will apply to the 7 heads of the dragon in the book of Revelation. So you read Daniel to understand the book of Revelation. Too many teachers try to teach Revelations on standing alone, and they get convoluted teachings or understandings of what this symbol is supposed to mean, and it adds more confusion to the whole eschatology teaching rather than going to Daniel as the source for determining what the symbols in Revelation represents. Now, Sunday I had mentioned that God led me to Dr. John Walvoord for studying his teachings on the end times, on eschatology. He was a professor of eschatology at the Dallas Theological Seminary. He was, at the time, he's passed away now for like 15, 18 years. At the time, was regarded as a foremost expert on eschatology in the United States. He wrote 2 books. One, eschatology on the Jesus Christ Now I'm drawing a blank on the name of the book. It's Jesus Christ, a Key to Prophecy, I think it was called. But then he also wrote a book called Daniel, the Key to Revelations. And in the second book, Key to Revelation, then he points out, the importance and the interconnectivity between Daniel and the book of Revelation. So if you're going to study, you want to study all those and begin with Daniel in understanding Revelation. So now, you have, for as far as world kingdoms, you have Egypt, Assyria, then Babylon, Medes and Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and then the future world kingdom, which allows the Antichrist to rise to power. Picturing those the six that Daniel saw in the vision, interpreted in the vision, picturing those six kingdoms, what do they have in common? What do they have in common? Okay, they're metal, yeah. Historically, these kingdoms, when they existed, what did they have in common? There's a common thread running through the whole series, through these six kingdoms, empires. Each one tried to destroy the Jews. Every one of them tried to destroy the Jews. Babylon, of course, Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem and killed tens of thousands, took tens of thousands into captivity, trying to wipe them out, assimilate them and wipe them out. The Medes and the Persians, although they were most favorable because it was under Cyrus that allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem, what story under the Persians? Esther. That Naaman that tried to destroy the Jews. Then you have the Greeks, who also, under Antiochus Epiphanes, when he was ruling, again destroyed tens of thousands of Jews. It's a kind of a long story. He was trying to defeat Egypt and got rebuffed because of alliance between Egypt and Romans, and he got sent back with his tail between his legs, and he took it out on the Jews in Jerusalem and captured, enslaved tens of thousands, killed tens of thousands, forbade the practice Judaism. So he tried to wipe out the Jews. Then you have the Romans, which we all know. I mean, they were the ones that ultimately crucified Jesus Christ. But they, again, killed tens of thousands, took tens of thousands into slavery, exported 10,000 to diaspora, and trying to destroy the Jews. We're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against powers and principalities. Satan. All these, although they're separated by time, Satan has no boundaries as such. He undergirded each one of them, influenced each one to destroy the Jewish people. Destroy the Jewish people, you destroy the Messianic line. Destroy the Messianic line, you destroy the first coming of Jesus Christ. He failed to do that. God thwarted that. You can read the stories on each one of them. Thwarted that to where Satan had to go directly after Jesus himself in the Roman Empire. The babies in Bethlehem, manipulated through Herod, sent the army to destroy the babies 2 years and under. That God thwarted. Then it was the temptation of Jesus while he was in the flesh. And then ultimately the crucifixion, with Satan said, I finally got him. I finally got him up on the cross. I finally got victory. Yeah, how'd that work out? So this is all, everything that's been done has been done for the defeat of Judaism and thus Christianity. So this is all, again, the working of an influence of the Satan, the satanic power. We're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against powers and principalities. And Satan has lost, and he knows he's lost. His time is coming up, and he's going to be more and more desperate. We see this taking place in the world. We see the ugliness is growing darker and darker, and the love of people growing colder and colder towards one another as we're going on, because we're getting closer and closer, and Satan knows his time is coming to an end. And he's going to be more desperate. And like I mentioned Sunday, if the world is in the condition it is with the church here and the Holy Spirit present, what's it going to be like with the Holy Spirit gone and the church gone? It's going to be literal hell on earth, regular hell on earth. So when we start looking at the seals and the trumpets and the bowls, we're going to see some of that being played out. So we have this effort to destroy the Jewish people and subjugate the Jewish people. In Exodus 8, chapter 8, when Moses was sent by God to Pharaoh, he sent him to Pharaoh, and he said, God said to Moses, tell Pharaoh this, Israel is my son. Israel is my son. Israel is my firstborn. My firstborn. If Israel, the Jewish people, are the firstborn, what's that make us? All the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people. Secondborn. Israel is our older brother. There's a doctrine called primogeniture, the right of the firstborn, to receive the double portion and the blessing. That's why with Esau and Jacob, when Jacob was wrestling, with to get that blessing and doing some conniving to get the blessing and the double portion. When Joseph introduced his sons to Jacob, and Jacob blessed them, and he put his right hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Manasseh. Joseph said, "No, Father, you got it wrong." And he said, "No, Father," and Jacob said, "No, son. Ephraim is getting the double portion and blessing by God's choice." Primogeniture. It's not necessarily a guaranteed biological, but there's a spiritual aspect to it as well. And that was played out in that example as well. So the power of the firstborn. Have the Jews been in a position of being blessed, the double portion and blessing, since the time of their freedom from Babylon? They've been dominated every single week, every single month, every single decade and year since that time. They've been dominated ever since then. Then they were without a country at all until God orchestrated them coming back. But even now, they're under constant threat and persecution, but constant threat from surrounding enemies and everything. They are not in a position of dominance. Gentiles have dominated them from the days of Babylon. They are not in a firstborn position. That is going to be restored with Jesus' return to earth and him crushing, when he falls on that statue, the Gentile nation of Babylon and everything it represented, the Gentile nation of the Medes and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans, and then the future kingdom with the clay and the iron. Those are all going to be destroyed, and what it's saying is, Jesus, I'm destroying the dominance of the Gentiles over my firstborn. I am destroying that dominance, and Israel is going to be raised up to its rightful place, firstborn position, and receive all the blessings and the double portion that's due them, that have been missing. And they brought it on themselves in that they rejected the Messiah and other, you know the story. You know the story. But at that time, they're going to come to that point where they're going to bow down before Jesus and recognize him as the Messiah, their Messiah as well. And they're going to praise God. They're going to repent. I went through, there was those six elements to the Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 through 27, those six elements that God's going to accomplish over that time frame. And those six elements cover that as well. They're going to be restored to their rightful place in God's eyes and receive everything that God intended them to be. It's going to be a glorious time. And I'm personally, and again, not making predictions, but I personally believe that I'll be alive to see that take place. I believe it's that near of a time when Jesus is returning. I got reasons for it, both scriptural and prophetic, but even if it doesn't happen in my lifetime, it's near enough that my children will see it. Are we ready for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to return to earth? Are we ready? I mean, we're in a privileged position to see this unfolding. All this globalization that's taking place, desensitizing the people that are going to be left in the world to the coming of the Antichrist, the future world leader. And so that when we, the church, are taken up and out of this world, there's not going to be any obstacle to the powers of Satan nor the future world ruler to do what they want to do in dominating the people and getting, setting the Antichrist world ruler up to be worshipped. That's what the false prophet is there for, to help point people to the world ruler that he's worshipped. And so all this is taking place, and to desensitize people to all this taking place. So all this globalization is for a purpose, and we're seeing more and more of it. And if you've been watching any of the news and listening to any of the world news and such, and all that's taking place in bringing globalization of the laws and powers, they're doing the currency, the military, the medical care, all these efforts to globalize all this is for the world kingdom, the Antichrist. But per the scriptures, we're not going to be here to be under that world domination. It's very clear that, and in the Wednesday, July, well, it'll be next week, July 12th, I'm going to go through and show that functionally, those that would teach that the rapture is going to take place after Jesus returns to earth, that functionally cannot work. It functionally cannot work. The scriptures do not support it as much. And there's teachers that their whole heart, they're good people and everything. They fully believe that the church has to go through the tribulation period. There's scriptures that overtly say, no, the church is not going to go through the persecution of the tribulation period. I'm going to point those scriptures out, and I'm going to show you why functionally the rapture of the church cannot happen at the return of Jesus Christ when he takes the throne of David. And I'm going to show you the scriptures and why that doesn't work. The pre-tribulation position, meaning that we're going to be raptured before the 70th week of all this garbage that's going to take place, that is what the scriptures teach, and we're going to be taken up and out of this, and we're going to be observing all this taking place on earth from our heavenly position. So if you want to hear, you may have different opinion on that. That's fine. As far as when the rapture is going to take place, but I really ask you to be open to listen to the argument I have, and you can see that from the scriptures it teaches that the rapture cannot take place at the second coming of Jesus. So it's referred to as the second coming. So with that, I thank you for listening. Again, there was kind of drinking from a fire hose with everything that's taking place on this, but it'll give you a little taste of what the scriptures teach about the end times and God's prophetic plan for Israel and the nations, the Gentiles. And this is part of what we spoke about today with the Jewish people being raised up, the Israelites being raised back up to their rightful position as firstborn. It's going to take place, and that's part of God's plan is to make that happen. So thank you very much, and God bless you.